Today we're going to discuss a new approach in language teaching, which is the community language learning, or CLL. So the method we will examine in this chapter advises teachers to consider their students as whole persons. Whole person learning means that teachers consider not only their students' intellect, but they also have some understanding of the relationship among students' feelings, physical reactions, instinctive protective reactions, and the desire to learn. The community language learning method takes its principles from the more general counseling learning approach developed by Charles A. Curran. So Curran studied about adult learning for many years. He found that adults often feel threatened by a new learning situation. They are threatened by the change inherent in learning and by the fear that they will appear foolish. Curran believed that as a way to deal with the fears of students is for teachers to become language counselors. Now, there are stages in community language learning. First, we have the birth stage. Feeling of security and belonging are established. Dependence on the knower as learners have little or no idea of the target language. Next stage is the self stage. As the learner's ability improves and starts to get an idea of how language works, they achieve a measure of independence from the parent, although they still seek help from the knower. The third stage is the separate existence. In this stage, learners can speak independently. Fourth, we have adolescence. The learners are independent, although they are aware of gaps in their knowledge and feel secure enough to take criticism and being corrected. And the last stage is the independence. Complete independence from the knower. The child becomes an adult and becomes the knower. Here are some of the principles of community language learning. Building a relationship with and among students is very important. Any new learning experience can be threatening. When students have an idea of what will happen in each activity, they often feel more secure. People learn non-defensively when they feel secure. Language is for communication. Next, the superior knowledge and power of the teacher can be threatening. If the teacher does not remain in the front of the classroom, the threat is reduced and the student's learning is facilitated. Also, this fosters interaction among students rather than only from student to teacher. Next, the teacher should be sensitive to students' level of confidence and give them just what they need to be successful. In CLL, students feel more secure when they know the limits of an activity. Teacher and students are whole persons. Sharing their feelings about the learning experience allows learners to get to know one another and to build community. Next, guided by the knowledge that each learner is unique, the teacher creates an accepting atmosphere. Learners feel free to lower their defenses, and the learning experience becomes less threatening. The teacher counsels the students. He does not offer advice, but rather shows them that he is really listening to them and understands what they are saying. By understanding how students feel, the teacher can help students gain insights into their own learning process, as well as transform their negative feelings, which might otherwise block their learning. The student's native language is used to make the meaning clear and to build a bridge from the known to the unknown. Students feel more secure when they understand everything. Next, the teacher should take the responsibility for structuring activities clearly in the most appropriate way possible for successful completion of an activity. Learning at the beginning stages is facilitated if students attend to one task at a time. The teacher also encourages student initiative and independence, but does not let students flounder in uncomfortable silences. Students need quiet reflection time in order to learn. Students learn best when they have a choice in what they practice. Students develop an inner wisdom about where they need to work. If students feel in control, they can take more responsibility for their own learning. Next principle, students need to learn to discriminate. For example, in perceiving the similarities and differences among the target language forms. We also have in groups, students can begin to feel a sense of community and can learn from each other as well as the teacher. Cooperation, not competition, is encouraged. The teacher should work in a non-threatening way with what the learner has produced. Another principle, developing a community among the class members builds trust and help to reduce the threat of the new learning situation. Also, learning tends not to take place when the material is too new or conversely, too familiar. Retention will best take place somewhere in between novelty and familiarity. In addition to reflecting on the language, students reflect on what they have experienced. Let us now review the principles of the community language learning method in answering our 10 questions. So some additional information about the method will also be provided. First question, what are the goals of teachers who use the community language learning method? Teachers who use CLL want their students to learn how to use the target language communicatively. In addition, they want their students to learn about their own learning, to take increasing responsibility for it, and to learn how to learn from one another. All of these objectives can be accomplished in a non-defensive manner if the teacher and learners treat each other as whole persons, valuing both thoughts and feelings. Second question, what is the role of the teacher? What is the role of the students? The teacher's initial role is primarily that of a counselor. This does not mean that the teacher is a therapist or that the teacher does no teaching. Rather, it means that the teacher recognizes how threatening a new learning situation can be for adult learners. So he skillfully understands and supports his student in their struggle to master the target language. Initially, the learners are very dependent upon the teacher. It is recognized, however, that as the learners continue to study, they become increasingly independent. Community language learning methodologists have identified 5 stages in this movement from dependency to mutual interdependency with the teacher. In stages 1, 2, and 3, the teacher focuses not only on the language, but also on being supportive of learners in their learning process. In stage 4, because of the student's greater security in the language and readiness to benefit from corrections, the teacher can focus more on accuracy. It should be noted that accuracy is always a focus even in the first 3 stages. However, it is subordinated to fluency. The reverse is true in stages 4 and 5. Third question, what are some characteristics of the teaching learning process? In the beginning class, students typically have a conversation using their native language. The teacher helps them express what they want to say by giving them the target language translation in chunks. These chunks are recorded, and when they are replayed, it sounds like a fairly fluid conversation. Later, a transcript is made of the conversation, and native language equivalents are written beneath the target language words. The transcription of the conversation becomes a text with which students work. Various activities are conducted. For example, examination of a grammar point, working on pronunciation of a particular phrase, or creating new sentences with words from the transcript. That allows students to further explore the language they have generated. During the course of the lesson, students are invited to say how they feel, and in return, the teacher understands them. According to Curran, there are 6 elements necessary for non-defensive learning. The first of these is security. Next is aggression, by which Curran means that students should be given an opportunity to assert themselves, be actively involved, and invest themselves in the learning experience. One way of allowing for this in One way for allowing this is for students to conduct their own conversation. The third element is attention. One of the skills necessary in learning a second or foreign language is to be able to attend to many factors simultaneously. To facilitate this, especially at the beginning of the learning process, the teacher helps to narrow the scope of attention. The fourth element is reflection. Retention is the fifth element, the integration in the new material that takes place within the whole self. The last element is discrimination. It is sorting out differences among target language forms. Fourth question, what is the nature of student-teacher interaction? What is the nature of student-to-student interaction? The nature of student-teacher interaction in CLL changes within the lesson and over time. Sometimes the students are assertive as when they are having a conversation. At these times, the teacher facilitates their ability to express themselves in the target language. He physically removes himself from the circle, thereby encouraging students to interact with one another. At other times, in the lesson, the teacher is very obviously in charge and providing direction. At all times, initially, the teacher structures the class. At later stages, the students may assume more responsibility for this. As Rardy 1988 has observed, the community language learning method is neither student-centered nor teacher-centered, but rather teacher-student centered, with both being decision makers in the class. Building a relationship with and among students is very important. In a trusting relationship, any debilitating anxiety that students feel can be reduced, thereby helping students to stay open to the learning process. Students can learn from their interaction with each other as well as their interaction with the teacher. A spirit of cooperation, not competition, can prevail. Fifth question, how are the feelings of the students dealt with? Responding to the students' feelings is considered very important in CLL. One regular activity is inviting students to comment on how they feel. The teacher listens and responds to each comment carefully. By showing students he understands how they feel, the teacher can help them overcome negative feelings that might otherwise block their learning. Student security in this lesson was provided for in a number of ways. Some of these were the teacher's use of the student's native language, telling students precisely what they would be doing during the lesson, respecting established time limits, giving students only as much as language at a time as they could handle, and taking responsibility for structuring activities clearly in the most appropriate way. While security is a basic element of the learning process, the way in which it is provided will change depending upon the stage of the learner. Next question, how is the how is the language viewed? How is culture? Okay. How is the language viewed? How is culture viewed? Language is for communication. Curran writes that learning is persons, meaning that both teacher and students work at building trust in one another and the learning process. At the beginning of the process, the focus is on sharing and belonging between persons through the language tasks. Then the focus shifts more to the target language, which becomes the group's individual and shared identity. Curran also believes that in this kind of supportive learning process, language becomes the means for developing creative and critical thinking. Culture is an integral part of language learning. What areas of language are emphasized? What language skills are emphasized? In the early stages, typically the students generate the materials since they decide what they want to be able to say in the target language. Later on, after students feel more secure, the teacher might prepare specific materials or work with published textbooks. Particular grammar points, pronunciation patterns, and vocabulary are worked with based on the language the students have generated. The most important skills are understanding and speaking the language at the beginning with reinforcement through reading and writing. Next question, what is the role of the student's native language? Student security is initially enhanced by using their native language. The purpose of using the native language is to provide a bridge from the familiar to the unfamiliar. Where possible, literal native language equivalents are given to the target language words that have been transcribed. This makes their meaning clear and allows students to combine the target language words in different ways to create new sentences. Directions in class and sessions during which students express their feelings and are understood are conducted in the native language. In later stages, of course, more and more of the target language can be used. By the time students are in stages 3 and 4, their conversations have few native language words and phrases. In a class where the students speak a variety of native languages, conversations take place right from the start in the target language. Meaning is made clear in other ways, with pantomime, pictures, and the use of target language synonyms, for example. Last question: how does the student respond to student errors? Teachers should work with what the learner has produced in a non-threatening way. One way of doing this is for the teacher to recast the student's error, for example, to repeat correctly what the student has said incorrectly without calling further attention to the error. Teachers should work with what the learner has produced in a non-threatening way. One way of doing this is for the teacher to recast the student's error, for example, to repeat correctly what the student has said incorrectly, without calling further attention to the error. One way of doing this is for the teacher to recast the student's error, for example, to repeat correctly what the student has said incorrectly without calling further attention to the error. Techniques depend on where the students are in the five-stage learning process, but are consistent with sustaining a respectful, non-defensive relationship between teacher and students. Before I end the discussion, let me leave you with the two most basic principles which underlie the kind of learning that can take place in CLL, which are the following. First, learning is persons, which means that whole person learning of another language takes place best in a relationship of trust, support, and cooperation between teacher and students and among students. Second, learning is dynamic and creative, which means that learning is an ongoing developmental process. Do you agree with these two basic principles? Do you believe that the teacher should adopt the role of a counselor, as Kuran uses the term? Should the development of a community be encouraged? Please comment down your answers for those questions. I will see you in our next discussion.